Keeping your business healthy in today's marketplace can be a challenging and overwhelming task. From the threat of litigation inside and outside your organization and the inefficiencies that can rob your bottom line as a result of unproven marketing programs, the deck can be stacked against you. To get ahead of these challenges and stay ahead of your competition, the Bottled Business Sense Show provides practical business solutions that uniquely emphasize key legal principles, management techniques, and marketing strategies to protect and ensure the longevity of your business. You'll learn how to implement marketing and protection principles equal to those used by today's most successful corporations. Join your hosts Bill Bernard, Rick Moscoso, and Steve Smith for some high-energy discussion that will inspire you to take control of your business so it can prosper in today's consistently challenging business environment.
Good morning, everyone. This is the Bottled Business Sense Show here on Tuesday at 10 a.m. I am Rick Moscoso, one of your co-hosts this morning. And before I bring on Bill and Steve, I wanted to welcome everyone here to the show. We are a show that just shares business strategies, legal tips, marketing strategies with business owners to help you be more productive in your businesses. And hopefully you can find a lot of this information helpful as you go about your day-to-day process. We have a great website of resources of videos that you can go to, and that's bottledbusinesssenseshow.com. You can also send in an inquiry to us if you'd like to be a host on the show. You can always contact us at bottledbusinesssenseshow@gmail.com. We're all over social media, and then also on Twitter at bbsense show.
And I got to interject here, Rick. I'm sorry, but we want some guests, not hosts. We got enough hosts on the show.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Did I misspeak there? That's right. I meant guests.
That's right. We don't need any more cooks in this kitchen.
Yeah, that's right. We have just the right amount here. So with that, let's bring on my other two co-hosts, Bill Bernard and Steve Smith. How are you guys doing this morning?
Doing great. Another great show. And believe it or not, what everything Rick just said is true and is for free, folks. Where do you get this kind of great stuff for free? Not very much anymore in this world, but that's what we do, and we love doing it. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing wonderful. It's we're getting into the new year here, and I just feel really good about where I'm headed and all the stuff that you guys are all in the same boat. You work for years and years trying to get things to a point where you feel like you've got control over stuff. So it's kind of nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, go ahead, Rick. What I would like to do today is I wanted to roll some stuff out there and get my colleagues' comments on it, because I think that would be the best way to do this. So we're going to talk about running multiple stores or businesses. We're going to talk about what a business owner needs to do to protect himself and to make sure that their business is running the way it should internally, so it doesn't cause external damage. By that I mean lawsuits or arguments or losing customers, whatever the case may be. And so we're going to start off the show by talking about standard operating procedures that you should have working for you in your business. And I'm going to let this go along, and I'm sure I'm going to have some great comments from my two colleagues. So let me start off by talking about a really important standard operating procedure, and we'll refer to it as SOP for short. Not SOB, SOP.
But I'm sure there's some situations where SOB would be a more appropriate term, right?
There could very well be, but it won't be covered on this show. Monetary transactions. This covers anything that concerns monetary handling at your store or your place of business, including the various types of how you accept refunds and returns, how you accept credit card charges. This is really important because when you're running your business, and I know as we go along, you guys will have comments on this, that, you got to have these procedures in place. And what we're going to talk about is not only what procedures you would have in place, but then the necessity to document them and the necessity to then, if necessary, delegate those duties to the people you trust within your company so it continues to run smoothly. And it's funny we're talking about this because the last show we did over Christmas, Steve talked about how we move our business forward in the new year, and I mentioned at the end of this show we need to do a show on how and when you delegate and when you don't, and this will follow up on that as well. So I'm looking forward to that show. But anyway, monetary transactions are really something that needs to be an SOP in your company. You need to have it documented so your employees can follow along. Because remember, if your employees do something wrong or they have a procedure that they use that isn't documented, it's going to fall back on you as the business owner, as their employer, and that could cause you some outside problems. So that would be the first SOP. The second would be,
Bill, if you don't mind me chiming in on this.
No, go right ahead.
To me, when I look at how you, as a business, how you handle monetary transactions, there's the transactions you have with your customers, okay? And then there's the transactions that take place or the handling thereof inside the company.
That's right.
And I have, as part of my early career, worked in the retail food business, not in stores, but we worked with the stores.
Right.
And one of the things I used to get a lot from store managers was having to deal with things like pilferage, which is basically employees, absconding with, with monies, with products, with things of that nature. So anything that's either cash in hand, or has a cash value to it, you've got to have systems in place where you can track the flow of that stuff. Because without that, you're going to have a percentage of employees in the workplace that will see that as an opportunity to skim.
You're absolutely.
You got to have things in place to keep people from being lured into thinking that that's an easy way to pad their pockets because nobody's watching.
I agree. So for those listeners and viewers who may be taking notes, let's put the first SOP as monetary transactions, and it's both in terms of customers and in terms of your internal employees, because you want to make sure, like Steve said, you want to make sure you know where the money's going. I had an instance with a client where there wasn't an SOP in place for monitoring these transactions, and it goes right to what Steve was saying. There's a potential embezzlement in the company, and who knows what that could lead to, and now there is an SOP for that, and it's a little bit late, but it's better late than never. So that's an important point that Steve brings up. The second one I would throw out there would be customer service. You should have some sort of an SOP in place, and again, when I say in place, I mean both in place, communicated and in writing, to outline instructions and policies on how your staff should behave, the things they can and they can't say, for example, as well as what to do when customers get difficult or if a customer gives you a problem. And that could range everything from everywhere from verbal communication to nonverbal communication. You really ought to have a talk with employees to make sure they're on the same page in terms of what you want and in terms of how your customers are treated. I think that's important, don't you, Steve and Rick?
Absolutely, but here's something I would add to that, because typically when people put standard operating procedures in place for every facet of their business, the usual viewpoint to this is, what structure do we have to put in place to keep people from making mistakes, from doing things that would not be considered, supportive of what the company is trying to do. So there's a little bit of a kind of a negative, punitive side to doing these things. It's all keeping people from harming the business. One of the things that I suggest people do if they're dealing with the public, and you've gone to the efforts of finding and hiring and training good people, make sure part of that SOP that deals with dealing with clients or dealing with customers, whether it's store based or or service based in some other way, give them a level of authority that you're going to back them on. Nordstrom's is a great example of this. That sales clerk in any particular department that they're in, they have an incredible amount of power to make that customer happy. And if it involves spending money or taking things back, they're empowered to do that. They don't have to run up 3 or 4 levels of management to get an answer.
Right.
So you have to look at your own business and determine what you're in business to do and how important quality customer service is. All I'm just saying is, don't forget that people at all levels need to have the latitude to make decisions on the spot if it means taking a customer that's not happy and making them a loyal customer.
I agree with you 100%, Steve. It's so important. And again, we've talked about this on the show before, how important it is to not just be the professional that you are in your trade, but also the business owner and the businessman and businesswoman.
So, Bill, I think we talked about this once before. We touched on it. So, as we're talking about these standard operating procedures, is this something then that should be detailed in your employee handbook?
Yes, I would put it in the employee handbook. I've even seen a couple of my clients who thought it was important enough to just have an SOP handbook where they outline specific standard operating procedures. Why do you do that? Well, that makes it easier for the employee to consult rather than having to go through the whole handbook. The handbook it should be in the handbook because all procedures in the handbook should be there for the employee when he starts the job, he or she. But the SOP manual is typically done separately, so it's an easy reference tool.
Yeah, and hey, let me just add one piece to that, Rick. If what you're talking about is a strategic part of what makes your company desirable to do business with, you have that operating procedure written down, in terms of a strategy. This is how you operate. This is how you interact. This is how you solve problems. This is how you help people find solutions. Whatever it happens to be, back it up with training. If you just put it in writing, you stick it in some handbook, the chances are the average person isn't going to spend any time finding it and reading it. But if it's important to the operation of the company and the profitability, make a training module out of it and make sure everybody is trained up so that they know how to do it. Because here's the problem with dealing with customers that are kind of difficult to handle. They don't happen every day. In fact, sometimes you could be working for months, and until you get into a holiday season and everybody's under a little bit of stress, you may not have any exposure to dealing. And all of a sudden, somebody walks in one day and wants to burn the store down. And how do you deal with it? You're kind of caught off guard. So you have to keep the training going for these critical areas that you're performing in, so everybody is ready to go.
Yeah, and training's great because I'll give you an example. As my son's heavily involved in the Scouts, and I've volunteered to be the assistant cub master of our pack. A lot of the leadership that is in charge of guidance for the Scouts has to go through youth protection training, and it's in the form of video, and it's a great way to make sure that the standards are established right up front. And so this is a great example of what you're talking about, Steve, in standardizing this stuff in your standard operating procedure. So
Yep, and this overlaps as well with so many overlapping areas in this show. This overlaps with employer-employee obligations and what you need to do to make sure your employees are on board. What duties the employees have toward the company. This is all preventative maintenance, folks. This prevents lawsuits and at the same time allows your company to prosper. I mean, think about it. You have these procedures in place for a reason because you want to make this company or this business run smoothly. And likewise, it protects your backside. It really, truly does. The next one I would point out would be, and I thought this is an interesting one that I've been looking at for a while, the customer experience. This can range everything from keeping the store clean and giving a customer the first impression or a client the first impression, an office, anything, to all the way to the bigger companies who have actually done studies on what the volume of music should be that's playing in the background, perhaps. So the aesthetics, if you will, of the customer experience, I think is important, and you should have some documentation on that. For whoever might be in charge of that. Who's in charge of cleaning the store? Who's in or the office? How do you make sure that that's done? Do you have junk chairs in the front office where you at the waiting room, or do you have nice furniture? Do you have some plants in there, or do you have some fish swimming around in a pool of water? Or I mean, what do you got going for you that's going to make the customer or the client have an initial great first experience?
Okay, Bill, here's one to add to that list. And quite honestly, when you have employees that don't comply in this area, it's a difficult discussion sometimes to have.
Yes.
But it's personal appearance.
Yeah, good one.
What do people come to work dressed like? How are they groomed? I mean, I'll never forget my very first district manager job when I was General Mills. I had a guy in my group, and this is back on the East Coast. I had a guy in my group that used to dress with with suits on. They weren't the established colors of the day, but they were nice suits. They were kind of on the vintage side. But every day he showed up, he'd have on this nice suit, shirt, and a tie, and nice dress shoes. But he'd be wearing gym socks.
Yeah, right.
And it's like the things were so puffy they'd be sticking out from underneath his pants. And so finally I had to sit him down one time and say, so and so, are you aware of what this looks like? Yeah. And until we had this discussion, which was a little prickly. I mean, you're talking about somebody's appearance. It never really dawned on him that people would actually take note of the fact that it looked like he had just come from the gym, and tried to throw a suit on and get all professional. So having things established in terms of what the parameters are. I mean, the other thing was when I was in a corporate in a corporate world. Back in the middle late 80s, I was up in the New Jersey market, and that was at the time when they decided to test the waters on going business casual on Fridays. That opened up a whole kettle of fish in terms of what does business casual look like for the women employees. Yeah, because it's okay. There's a whole range of things you can you can show up with. You got to get that stuff nailed down early, or it just opens up a lot of problems. And
that could fall right into potential harassment suits, sexual harassment.
Yeah, absolutely.
You really have to be careful of that, and that's why I say this is so very important to have this in writing and have this provided to the employee at the outset. Then there's never any questions as to what you're supposed to do, and the fact that all employees are going to be treated equally. That's important. It's after the fact that problems arise.
Yes.
Another one, the fourth one, I think is very important, and that's safety and security. What if you have a problem with a customer in the store? What if you have a shoplifter? If you have that kind of a business? What if you have a natural disaster, an earthquake? Or what if you have some other type of incident? We all know what's going on in the world today. What happens if you have some sort of a combatant situation? Who's the person in charge of opening and closing the store? Who's got that responsibility? That's really important. And security and safety is a big issue, of course, with Cal OSHA, and Cal OSHA is a big area that you put in your employee handbooks. This, however, is a more narrow function for employees when they need to reach for that SOP and make sure they're in compliance.
Well, depending on the kind of business you're running, let's say you have you've got a 7-Eleven franchise and you own 6 7-Elevens, throughout the place that you live or the county. Probably one of the areas that you're going to have to prep your employees for, which is a big problem for most convenience stores, is being held up. Because here in California, virtually any retail store that sells food or other things like that can sell liquor, and they're all very cash heavy stores to do business with, because people are in there buying. The cash register ring is usually pretty small, under $20. So you got a lot of cash transactions, and if you're sitting on a lot of cash, what do you do when somebody comes in the door and puts a mask on and wants you to empty the cash drawer? So that's kind of a safety situation that people need to be trained up as how to handle that, so they don't end up getting shot in the process.
That's right. And just to go flip back to the last one about aesthetics, Steve, real quick. One of the things I meant to mention it earlier is this guy John King on CNN, right? He's a reporter, and he is always sitting behind the desk. Well, now recently, for 5-6 times, I've seen him stand up and do things on this board that he draws on, and he wears a tie and a jacket, and he's got these jeans with these kind of like work boots on. And it's unbelievable to me that this guy's on national television dressed like that, and the presentation that it gives for CNN in general. I'm amazed every time I see it.
He's trying to be GQ. I mean, it's this whole mixed apparel look that I see a lot of guys wearing. It's just.
Well, I'm not a fashion expert. I'm a watch expert, so I wouldn't know too much about it. But I did think it was a little bit odd. Anyway,
it's like you. It's like you there, Bill. You probably got jeans on underneath the desk.
No, man, I'm dressed up. I'm ready to go.
Rick, you give him too much credit. I don't think there's anything on underneath the desk.
That's right. We're going to have to make this an X-rated show if we keep up with this. But anyway, the last one I wanted to mention, there's a couple ones I want to touch on real quickly after this, but the last major one, and this really would go more toward the specific type of business you have, and probably is more in your area strictly, I would think, Steve, is layout and merchandising. If you have a layout and merchandising SOP, it should detail how the merchandise, for example, is appearing in your store, and it should answer questions like how should items be displayed on the floor, what fixtures you can use, should pants be folded or be hung in the store, if you have that type of an operation, how often you should update your layout, that kind of thing. I think you can make an argument to where this could also, in some sort of a different kind of a strain, apply to professional service businesses. But I think this is more for the guy who has the guy or the gal who needs to keep an eye on this stuff.
Well, okay, so here's an example if you're going to talk retailing and apparel. One of my brothers works for Ross, Dress for Less. And I've talked to him, and my wife even talked to him on occasion, because the local Ross store that we will go and look through, it's just always a mess, and he's told me time and time again, that's part of their strategy. They have that kind of disheveled, if you find it today, you better buy it because it may not be here next week. And so that's part of their actual marketing, to have that kind of disheveled, messy, wholesale type of look to it. Now, you go walk into a men's warehouse, and you're going to find everything neatly done by color and by size and by, all this kind of stuff. And, you walk in, it's a completely different experience. So I agree with you. Having standard operating procedures for how you merchandise your store or how you lay out your business has to go hand in hand with the atmosphere and the branding of what you're trying to reflect to your customer or your client base. Exactly. You can't be trying to attract a certain type of client from one socioeconomic level and set up a retailing or a business environment that just goes totally against that, because it's not going to last very long. And sometimes it's not that the business doesn't understand the way they have to go. It's the inconsistency of how it's set up, because people from one shift to the next or one day to the next don't do things the same.
All right. And I really like to kind of give kind of an analogy here. If you're going to implement these SOPs, I want to analogize it to for example, creating an LLC. You're going to file your articles of organization to create your LLC. So you're going to then you're going to document, very important, document your SOPs. Okay. Then for an LLC, you're going to create an operating agreement. Well, you're going to create these procedures, and then you're going to have discussions and delegate with various employees who's going to carry out these SOPs. And you're going to have an SOP that can be referred to in writing, just like you have an LLC operating agreement, where the members of the LLC can go and refer themselves to various portions of the agreement to know whose responsibility is what. Well, these SOPs are going to have whose responsibility is what. So you do these things logically in an order that's going to make some logical common sense. And I cannot emphasize enough the need to document this stuff. This is going to help your business run from a practical standpoint very, very expeditiously, very fluidly, and it's going to create more profits in a better year.
Hey, Bill, let me throw another completely different
for you in 20.
Let me throw a completely different reason in for doing all this, and I run into this a lot too. At some point, businesses that are, they've been operating for 20, 30 years, the owner's now in his early 60s, or, she's getting to the point where she'd rather cash the business out and, take care of the family or move on or do something different. Right. At some point, what I've learned in working with various business brokers and people that are consultants in the merger and acquisition field is when they go and evaluate a business, one of the things they look for is how well documented is the operating process of the business.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
There's monetary value hooked to buying a business, because let's face it, you're going to have a new owner, maybe a new management team that moves in. The one thing they don't want to do is have the business take a big dip on them, because in that short transition period, they don't know what they're doing. So having everything laid out and well documented and vetted in terms of this is a best practice, this works well, that can add real value to the sale of your business.
That's an excellent point, Steve. And I want to ask both you and Rick, when you listen to this and you hear this analysis, would you agree, both of you, that this is a really good example of how to make sure your business prospers, but at the same time make sure that your behind is covered so that it runs smoothly and prevents any kind of haphazard litigation or problems with employees down the road? I mean, I think this is a pretty good example of that personally.
Oh, absolutely. I have to agree because, we've been doing this show for a little under 2 years, you and I, Bill, and you've talked about this in the past about in the employee handbook, getting all your ducks in a row, documenting all these things, and having everything in place. So now that it's all documented, now you can focus more on becoming profitable and running your business,
right?
Versus having to backtrack and have to deal with all these things because you didn't do them from the get-go.
Yep.
Yeah, and Bill, the two things that I think about when I talk to people or get into conversations like this is consistency and accountability. Because when you have all of your operating processes worked out and they're part of how everybody operates in the company and they're all written down, it adds a measure of consistency in how you work that can be a big part of why people do business with you, because there's no surprises. They don't go there 1 month and it's great. Restaurants are prime for this. You go there 1 month and it's great, and you tell everybody about it, and 2 months later you show up and you think you stepped into a different restaurant. So, you've got consistency, but when things are put in writing, policies, procedures, rules, guidelines, things like that, when everything's in writing, it becomes official. So there's a certain amount of accountability that not only the owner who's thought this stuff up, but everybody working within that organization understands that this is the established way that we operate, and there's a certain accountability for doing it that way.
Yep, it's called in a phrase, I guess, Steve, everybody being on the same page, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And then if a problem develops, you can't say later on you didn't have notice of it, you weren't aware of it. I mean, you can say that, but it's not going to hold up.
You got a manual to go to. If it gets to the point where you have to bring an arbitration team in because you're embroiled in some kind of lawsuit that might be employee based or might be maybe owners, partners are split. You hear about that all the time. At some point, you're going to go and say, well, what did everybody agree to? What's the established mode of operating around here that's in writing that we can go to and say, okay, this is what everybody agreed to. So how far off are we in terms of what we're fighting about?
Yep. Well, I'd like to take the last 30 seconds of the show just to make this one commentary. Folks out there, if you want to really run your business correctly, you're going to get an entity, you're going to make sure all the proper documents are filed and that the proper agreements are drawn up. You're going to also then provide for your business and your employees a handbook. You're then going to have to do some standard operating procedures and put those in writing. Is this the cheapest way to go in running your business? No. But, you can pay me now or pay me later kind of thing. You really need to implement these things, and it really is up to you how serious you are about running your business and making it the best it can be. That's a decision you need to make by sitting down with perhaps a coach like Steve or an accountant and an attorney and deciding what direction you want to go. Can't emphasize that enough. Cannot.
So for somebody, Bill, that's interested in taking this discussion a little bit further, what's the best way to get a hold of you to strike up a discussion?
You can certainly contact me at my my web address, which is wfblegalconsulting.com, and phone numbers are 949 area code 413-6535 and 698-6222. And by the way, I have on my site a whole plethora of articles dealing with a number of different topics, in addition to all of the shows that come directly from the Bottle Business Sense show site. So if people can go there and they can pick and choose and listen and tie in whatever they want and get the benefit of my two great co-hosts and me all in one fell swoop. And remember, it's all free, folks. It's all free. I like free stuff. I think most of you do too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially after what we spent here on Christmas. Holy moly!
Yeah, well,
Need a break.
Well, guys, I another great show. I'm looking forward to seeing you both again next week, and we'll get together and tell our viewers and listeners further things that they need to know to keep going in the new year.
Cool. All right, guys, enjoy it. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.
Okay, take care, everybody.
All right. Bye.